Hey, everybody. Let's talk game design. I'm down here in the painting dungeon of Castle Von Wiley with Steve, and we've got
hello, everyone. Hello.
We've got a special guest for us tonight to talk about one of my favorite things, game design. So let's have him on. Yes, woo! Thomas Foss
and
in
I'm
the house.
spent. That was awesome. That was
yeah.
Like,
so that gives you
welcome.
Awesome.
all the different things Thomas does.
Yeah, that and more. Because I'm like rust. I never sleep.
Yeah, I do a lot now that I work from home. So tonight we had Thomas on so we can talk about as people who design games and also people who are lovers of game mechanics in general. I thought Thomas would be a great guy to have on. Plus, I know him, so that was helpful that I could call him in at the last minute and do this. We're going to have other game designers on. And he talks a lot. So we're going to have other game designers on, hopefully over the course of the broadcasts, but we thought we'd start with the best. So, Thomas, for those who don't know who you are, let them know.
Hey, I'm Thomas Foss, owner of Skull and Crown Miniatures and Games. I am a game designer. I've been designing games since 4th grade when I took two Stratego boards and cut them apart and smashed them together to make an epic battlefield. And kind of just started from there. My love for games and game design, working on pen and paper work, started my simple stuff like how many dart gun shots or Star Trek tracer shots you get for a unit of airfix Napoleonics.
Yep.
Sitting things like that. And it actually, I grew up, I became a game designer and video game designer as well. So I'm currently the studio design director at Lost Boys Interactive, which is a really awesome company I just started with, actually. And I've been doing video game design for about 25 years and tabletop design, I don't know, all the time.
It never stops. You've always got the stuff at the back of your head. You're always thinking, how can I do
always be
can't stop,
designing.
won't stop.
No, I didn't choose the gamer life. Gamer life chose me, man.
Yeah. every time I watch a movie or play another game or do something else, I'm just like, ooh, how could I turn this into a game?
And that's kind of the thing, right? It's, the challenge there is sometimes you have to try and separate yourself because it's really hard to not watch a movie or even a TV commercial and go, how could I make a game out of that? I'd make a great convention game or that. Yeah. Like how they get those rules. Sometimes it's hard to just sit back and enjoy it. It's like, I'm sure like when chefs go to restaurants or any time they eat, they're like,
how can I improve this?
Yeah. Or sometimes it's not even improving. It's just dissecting. Right? How do they make it work? Why did they pick that rule system? Why did they pick that spice in that food?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I spent like a year working on these fantasy rules, and Robin
which are
told
awesome,
me,
by the way.
You have to take a month off, and it lasted about 2 days. I was already working on a new project, so
which is good because I need you to fix my rules, and we need to work on the scenarios for space scrappers.
Yeah, so I had one of the pictures. We'll get. I promise we'll get onto the game philosophy thing, but one of the pictures that I had in there was for your recently completed space scrappers Kickstarter that you did. And if you love old school, old Hammer, love the old 40K look, then you will love these miniatures. And if you love Tolkien, that kind of thing. So
Yeah, the goal of that was basically a mashup of old school 40K Rogue Trader meets The Hobbit.
yeah,
Two things that I love a lot.
yeah, I was gonna say, and you basically made this because you wanted to make something you want.
Yeah, because I love it. I mean, that's the whole idea, really.
So that's a great segue because I think that that is the whole crux of game design, especially like independent guys like us. You make the game that you want to play. You know, I mean, some games are obviously they're made specifically because they tie into a miniature set, or it's a company that's a miniatures company, and to sell the miniatures, they need to have rules to go with the miniatures so they could sell them.
Right.
So, so I think the whole designing the thing you love is the key to putting out good product.
It definitely helps. But,
yeah.
but you know, sometimes you have to design things that you don't necessarily love. And
Yeah.
you got to find the love in designing that. It's part of being a professional game designer, right?
It's also part of being a professional artist. I don't like every morning I get handed a job that I am not particularly enthused about, but I have to make it my own and make it work for the client, aka the company I work for. So
yeah, exactly. You find the sexy in it and you kind of make it your own, and that's actually what makes it start shining, right? Is you can, just like we were talking about, you know, taking a bite out of that food and like dissecting the ingredients, and like, oh, that's the ingredient, that's what makes it sing for me. You can kind of do that with you know, when someone hands you a dictum, like for a set of rules. Like I just did a set of rules for another Kickstarter, a designer, and it was Wizards Dueling.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, right. Right. So Die Hard Miniatures, I did an arena, a Wizard Arena duel, and at first, you know, the challenge there was to actually make a set of rules that were easily digestible, and that you could play on a small board with the miniatures provided. Right. So there's you know, it's like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Here are your bullet points of the things that, like here are your ingredients, but you got to make the cool cake out of it. It's kind of like that British baking show, right? You know?
Yeah, yeah, but not yeah. Here's the ingredients, but we're not going to tell you how to get there. So that's
right. Yeah, and I love that kind of challenge too. That's really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I've told the story before about my own. You know, I started out as a D&D player and always played with toy soldiers my whole life, and got the, you know, started messing after getting D&D, started messing with making, you know, just my own rules like you did, you know, where, okay, the flamethrower guy gets 3 dice, and the dude who's got the gun over his head, he gets a bonus in hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
And the minesweeper guy can get shot at a lot. So it was then finding out that there were, you know, actual war game rules and that were out there, and this had been a hobby that had been around for a long time, and then going to my first convention and being pissed off about that first convention and deciding to write my own rules, you know, and knowing what I liked about different aspects of, like, I didn't like, there's a place for I go, you go, but for me in a skirmish game, I like the ebb and flow of having that sort of reaction and having a sort of a basket of tactical things that you can do, but it has to constantly switch based on what pops up in the game.
Right. That kind of chaos of
battle. Yeah. So when you're thinking about, so let's say, I know, so first tell us the story about the Wooden Wars, since that was sort of how I got to know you, and then later on the Galleons.
Galleys, Guns, and Glory, yeah. So Wooden Wars started out when my son was 4 years old. we would play. I had a few wooden toy soldiers that were from that I got from Gettysburg years and years and years ago, and we were building forts with wooden blocks. And I happened to score at the Disney store. They had them on sale for like 75% off. These big Pirates of the Caribbean Nerf cannons. So you you pull the plunger back through the Nerf ball in and fire them, right? And I bought like all 4 of them and gave them to my godsons and painted their names on it and stuff like that. But we were playing cannonade, so I was teaching him like run out the guns, fire, fire, and he'd blow away the fort of the wooden blocks. And I'm like, man, I need reinforcements. I need more wooden toy soldiers. Yeah. So I started going out and looking for them, and I couldn't find them for love or money, right? Not any good ones. And then I thought, well, eventually I just decided to make my own, and that was my first Kickstarter. I needed to get a laser cutter to start laser cutting my own. I'd done prototypes with other companies that had laser cutters, but it was just cost prohibitive, and so that's kind of how it started. Now I needed to extrapolate the cannonballs to something different. And I tried, rubber bands, but like 4-year-olds should not be playing rubber. They can swallow them, like what eye-hand coordination. Well, also what eye-hand coordination. What do you know? What can you get, and what's readily available everywhere? And that basically came down to the rubber ball. It's just a rubber bouncy ball because they're cheap, they're easy, everybody can find them. Probably not going to swallow them. You're not going to get hurt stepping on them too much. So then I wrote the rules around that, and so I did simple movement with batons, which is basically you can just fold a piece of paper. So like infantry can move one baton, or they can fire a ball. And firing a ball or shoot. And shooting means that you toss the ball at your enemy, but the rule is it has to bounce at least once in order to be in play. And that gives you that historical inaccuracy of musket fire during that time. And that's kind of how it works.
And I've watched many of grown men that cannot do it. So
yeah. No, you need like the 9-year-old girl, 9 to a 12-year-old girl is like the perfect, absolute dead eye. Yeah, they're so good. They're coordinated. They're awesome. They're thinking about the goals. I've had so many good generals at game conventions. So these are games that I actually have blown up and run at bigger scale at conventions, and I'll have 15, 20 kids playing at once, right? Each one commanding a unit or two. And and I've done 2 sets. I did, my first love is Napoleonic. So I did Napoleonic sets. So you have infantry, cavalry, and artillery. So like a battery of 3 guns, they get to fire 3 balls all at once, but you have to toss them all at the same time. So you get that wonderful bouncer. And sometimes it's absolutely devastating, and sometimes they just miss. So they all have special rules. I also did a set of science fiction sets called Queen Victoria's Robot Wars, which actually you can see if I dodge this way. You can see a portrait of one of the kings that I'm doing back there. My King Richard 3000 for my Rivet Wars. So I have a whole war. I have a Queen Victoria's Robot Wars. It's like Victorian sci-fi, but it's more that ray gun Gothic style than it is steampunk.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was
which are now becoming metal ones, we think.
Well, I've done some prototypes in metal in 28, but I'm thinking that because for that one you want to buy it's big units and hordes of them and stuff. So I'm looking into either resin casting or scio casting, which is plastic casting. So I'm looking at options there, so that when people buy them, because shipping is definitely an issue and a challenge, right? The weight, especially sending overseas, is a big challenge, and just the level of detail and the price cost, because you definitely want in those kind of things to have like the big armies. So if I can get the cost down, but still keep the quality, which is super important to me, then that's one of the things I do. Yeah, otherwise they'll be in metal. I feel like I'm diverging. Yeah, so that was Wooden Wars. Most of my games start off with me making games for my kids and I to play with, my Fosslings. Several of the games, like my Breaking Lances game, which is a jousting game I built, was originally designed for a birthday party for my kids. Right? Each birthday I would come up with a game design for them. That was not only a game design, but was also a project involved in there. So I laser cut these wooden knights, and they got to paint them up. Yeah. And then they would joust, right? And play the game.
That's super awesome.
Because I mean, with tabletop and board games, you're pulling out the pieces and playing, and that's totally fine and great. But like with a miniatures game or something like that, there's a certain you get skin in the game.
It more. If I spent all this time painting it, then I'm invested in this.
Yeah, there's a certain skin in the game with that, right? And a lot of games that I that I used to play a lot. Like I just really like painting the miniatures. So playing the game was like a way to brag about painting the miniatures, right? Like bring them out to like show off to your friends, and it'd be like a friendly competition of like the painting of the units kind of thing.
So besides the stuff that you've made for your kids, like you did Galleys, Guns, and Glory, and that, if I remember correctly, was inspired by like paintings of the Renaissance paintings of these big like ship battles and stuff.
Oh yeah, from the Battle of Lepanto, exactly.
Yeah, and you're like, that's cool. I want to play that.
Yeah, thanks. The idea there really, well, most of my games are just like ideas because I haven't found the rules for them, or I just really like that period, and I just love the pageantry of it, or something like that. So it's an emotional pull to me, right?
Yeah.
And I love naval stuff, as you can all see behind me. And I'd already written a Pirates game, which I did in college when I was part of Flagship Games. And before that, it was 7th Street Games, where we wrote some 3D mecha rules with some of my college friends. I have both. Yeah, cool. Thanks.
Before I even knew you.
I know, that's cool. How cool is that? And so I was actually, Galleys, Guns, and Glory actually came out of the idea that I was working on was an Anglo-Dutch Wars period game. Because I love Anglo-Dutch Wars period ships because they're just basically floating sculptures. They're like cakes on the open ocean. Just
those sweet behinds that they
beautiful, have. Exactly. Just sculptures building the beautiful afts, stern castles. And so I started trying to design and laser cut some of those kind of things. And actually I have an example right here. But I couldn't quite... I hadn't quite got, like, this is the prototype example. Is that showing up okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Of one of the Anglo-Dutch War ship models I was working on. This is,
you're going to make McMurray lose it.
Yeah. So I'm still working on the designs for these. They're layered pieces. And the idea, one of the things that I love about naval is the pretty ships, no matter what period. I love ships, right? One of the things I don't like about naval games is like when you go to a convention and you're looking at a table and it's just this blue tablecloth or mat, and then these tiny little things about this big, and you're like, and they're kind of like in a row like ants because they're doing ships of the line or something. You're like, it must be a naval game because because what else would it be? I want my ships to be big and colorful, and you could look across the convention floor and they're just festooned with flags and colors and paint. Yeah. And that's what this started out to be. And I've actually scaled these up to about this big, so they're pretty nice. But they're not quite there design-wise yet, so they're not ready for the release to the public.
Well, I remember when I was helping you out with the flags for the galleys. You're like,
exactly.
I want sails. I want the flags that go with it. We got to have like 3 flags for each one of them. Plus the sails.
Yeah, they're absolutely gorgeous. So while I was designing these, I fell into like what other ship period do I like that I don't see a lot out there, and that was the Renaissance galleys and those beautiful paintings of just like this mass crunch of ships together and ship fighting. And it was a very interesting but short-lived period, but it was full of pageantry. So I designed the galleys and started working on the rules for that. And like you said, and then when I tapped Jay to actually do all the banners and flags and stern castles and awnings, and there's just these gorgeous pieces of work where there's just ships. I don't have an example around, sadly, of things everywhere. And so I wrote the rules for that. And while doing that, you do a lot of, when it comes to game design, especially historical game design, there are certain parameters that you have to feel out, right? It's got to, in my mind, the whole idea of building a game is it's got to feel right for the period. And that's super important, right? It doesn't have to be by the numbers accurate. This 9-pounder cannon shoots this far, and a 12-pounder shoots this far, and a 32-pounder shoots this far. You can average that. Or, like I did for my Pirates game, I realized that when you do a lot of research, most gunfire was done at 400 yards because that was the most accurate. No matter what the gun range, that was the killing zone.
About how far you could see, too.
Yeah, and that was the killing zone, right? So your little 9-pounders and your 32-pounders we're pretty much all firing at that range, except maybe you're using your chasers. So like you find out things like this, and it's a great place to average, and like it's also kind of a teaching moment. One of the things I really worried about when I was building my galleys, because a lot of the historical guys are real sticklers for scale. Is it 1/285th scale? Is it 1/9? You know, like what scale?
Yeah.
And I didn't know, so I had to do tons of research on galleys, trying to figure it out. And that led me to Venice because they had the Arsenal, and the Arsenal was a place where they could kick out a ship a day. It was like a Ford factory. They could literally build from stem to stern and launching in one day a galley. And they have a lot of good records as to what what measurement stuff they use, and they use these things called L's and handprints, and then you figure out that like a measurement was 5 hand widths, right? And an average galley was 146 L's. Well, whose hand?
Yeah.
My hand? Your hand? Like,
They were short back then.
The big fat guys. Exactly. So once I figured out that, like, of course they didn't have exact measurements because they're just, working off of what they had. I used that as my scale point, and I just used one hand equal 1 millimeter, and I scaled everything up, and it looked perfect. And I was super worried that was going to be a stickler in the naval world, the naval gamer world. And no, nary a thing. Once you explained that was your scale, people they were totally fine with it, which a cool thing. But that also brings me back to look and feel. When we were talking about rules, I was thinking about not my rules, but other people's rules that I like to play.
Yeah.
And a lot of the rules I like to play are rules where there's some sort of progression where you can kind of build like a gang and keep them going on, like Mordheim, Thomas Foss and his Mordheim rules. I super love them, right? Because you could kind of, and again, I'm the cobbler, so I got a new greatsword, so I'll glue the greatsword to the guy's back, or he's lost a leg.
I lost a hand.
Yeah, so I'll make a hook hand. Yeah, I will totally do that on my fingers, right? Yeah, lost a leg or a hand, totally do that. I love those kind of things. And it's kind of a skirmish thing that worked well. I think you got invested in your characters. You told they were storytelling moments to them, right? A lot. Same thing with like in an MMO. I've worked on several massive multiplayer online games, and it's the same thing. It's like like Neverwinter. It's your D&D character. It's the guy that you're leveling up with. It's your storytelling, and I love those kind of games for that kind of look and feel. When it comes to historical games, it's a bigger challenge for any kind of game designer to work on an historical game to get that look and feel. And there are different ways to do it that I think are pretty successful. Ones that come to mind for me that are successful would be, like, going back a little bit, would be Warmaster. I think that, first of all, I'm going to say right up that I'm a huge Rick Priestley fan. I think that his rules are very elegant with what he does. And his rules are, and Jay, you know this, you do it a lot, as well do I. He's got a basic core stock, like for his soup of rules, that he can use to actually build so many different cool things that have different flavors to them, but still work well, right?
Well, and your wooden wars that you did for War of Spanish Succession era are basically Warmaster.
Yeah. I definitely leaned heavily on Priestley's rules for that kind of idea. But like with Priestley's rules, like Warmaster, it's about big armies, but it's not about like, bow damage withers units down, but it doesn't really slaughter them. It's really about command and control. And that whole thing, it's when you start losing units or parts of units, how hard it is to command and control. It's really, and I love the game for that. And it also, the scale that he built it in, which was 10 millimeter. So you felt like you could have big armies and move them around.
Yeah, that was always the problem with regular Warhammer was you're supposed to have this general of this army, and he's got this giant griffin that he rides and stuff, and he's controlling like 150 dudes. Yeah. It's like it never, even on a big table, you never felt like you had the mass that you have when you do like Warmaster.
Right. And then
go
ahead, Steve, please.
No, I was just going to say, even before you had mentioned Warmaster, there was several people in the comments section that had mentioned Warmaster.
Oh my gosh, is there comments sections I'm totally missing? I do.
You should have a banner on the.
I do see it. Hey guys. Hey McMurray. Hey everybody.
Yeah.
Hey Beckus. Yeah, I love Warmaster 10 millimeter. Beckus. Is that like Pterodon?
It's
Beckus.
Paul.
Oh, it's Paul. Hey Paul. Yeah. Dark Ages Warmaster is really cool, and with the 3D printing of miniatures that are coming out right now in 10 millimeter, I'm just absolutely blown away.
Yeah,
with the quality of miniatures.
Forest Dragon they're basically just doing all the Warmaster armies and they're redoing them, and they're beautiful. I mean, they're not tied to GW in any way, but you can't copyright a Wood Elf or a Pegasus or whatever. So,
right.
But they're doing all the armies like you did, like the Corsairs. That I know you liked some of the armies that they never really did. That Warmaster and stuff.
Yeah, I think they've started doing some of the Slan and Lizardmen armies that we wanted, but were so hard to get a hold of, especially here in America, and even more so on the West Coast, right?
Yeah.
So I'm excited about doing that. I'm personally working very slowly on Warmaster Ancients. So I've got some Romans and some Celts that I've been working on, and I think that's really just
in 10 millimeter.
In 10 millimeter. They're Steve Barber miniatures.
Oh yeah.
Well, and some Pendragon miniatures for the Celts, like their chariots and things. Really nice.
Yeah, when you were talking earlier, I like games that feel right, that don't have to, you're not like you said, finding out the difference between the different poundages of guns and stuff. So when I was first starting and I did the original Fistful of Lead, I made the ranges what looked right on the tabletop.
Yeah.
Not like how far could an actual Colt Peacemaker fire, and
right.
What are the odds? I mean, if you do any of the historical stuff, you find out that they expended a lot of ammo to hit one guy, and so if you or the fact that most of the death was done by a shotgun, double barrel sawed off shotgun, and not 6 shooters, because like the crossbow, you don't need to be wholly trained. You just point in the general direction and shoot. So, so once I got past that, and I'm like, well, then if I'm not going history, I'm going to go Hollywood. I want to build a story. I want to make a team or a gang, and I want to do like you said, and have a story where they evolve. And it became more about the scenario and the fun story behind it, and less about the tactics of the weapons, and more about the tactics of the player, kind of a thing. And so I've always games that I didn't write, that I did a whole show last time. We just talked about other people's games that we like, and having that this sense of fun, and then for me having to write basically convention style rules, as I would call them, for most of my stuff, just because I don't have the luxury of just to sit down with one person,
I'm glad you brought that up, Jay, because anymore, all of my rule systems I actually base around convention design, right? And by that I mean I can stick you in the game, teach you the base game points in 5 minutes, and then get ready to play. Are there more nuances to the rules? Absolutely, that you can pick up, right, as you go along, or you play more. But that's really just it. And I like that. That's totally fine with me. And as a designer, it's actually a bigger challenge, because you have to really distill things down and figure out what is the essence of that game.
Yeah, one of my joys in life is being in a convention and being able to walk away, and the game runs itself. The players now know how to play, and they just play, and then they may ask me a question on the finer point of some sort of rule, but for the most part, once you teach them, they're doing it. And I've seen it like with your games where you got a 9-year-old explaining to the old man, no, that's not how it works. You have to do this and this.
Yeah, Breaking Lances is the perfect example of that. And what even cooler is like when you go to a convention and you see in the lineup people are running your game.
Yep.
And that's a huge ego boost. That's cool. I love that.
Sure it is.
Unless you go there and find out they're playing it wrong.
You know what? Actually, so like with my Pirates game, I've seen guys run it with like 20 players, and they've come up with better, like, instead of like writing down all the orders, they did these little dial knob things.
Yeah.
Absolutely genius. I didn't think of that. Like, that's so cool. So much better, right? Just at the time.
Several of the games that we've been playing for years and years and years, I think we've improved upon some things like that, or just, house rules became, well, that actually makes more sense kind of a thing. But
Yeah. Or sometimes it becomes house rules just because somebody cannot comprehend that specific rule. It's like, all right, just forget it. We're going to make this house rule.
And that's actually part of playtesting when I'm building rules. Is I'm actually writing a set of rules right now for Claymore castings for the 100 Years War, right? And working with Nicole Murray on that now. And I worked with David Emery, who's the owner of Claymore Castings, which, by the way, are beautiful medieval miniatures.
They are probably my favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Bickley doing most of the sculpts on those. The idea when I worked with David on this was he wanted a simple set of rules that he could play at conventions because, like I said, who wants to remember a bunch of charts and things, right?
Yeah.
And the idea is the pillars were, and by pillars I mean the standing stones. Like when I'm writing rules, you'll set up like pillars. Like this game is this, but it's not this. The flavor is this, but it's not this, right? It needs to be short, long, medium. Yes, it uses miniatures, these kind of things. So you want your basic pillars, and those are kind of like the place where you throw the spaghetti on the wall to see if it sticks when you're writing a rule. Like, does this rule even make sense? Like, is it one of the pillars? Is it needed? No, then let's get rid of it. But you also, and one of the things we were doing with the Claymore casting rules was we added in everything that we thought we wanted in, right? All the like dead ground and and hearses for archers and baggage
everything
trains
you read
and,
about
things you're doing. Yeah, exactly. But then as you're playtesting, there are rules that we kept forgetting to use. You're like, we keep forgetting to use this rule.
They didn't have any effect on the game. Really.
Yeah, exactly. Was it important? No, then get rid of it. Right? It doesn't really matter. You can throw it in as an optional rule if people want to have a more longer and detailed game. Yeah. But a lot of times, and that's really what it is. You kind of build it all up, and then you start tearing things out, and then doing the refining and cleaning.
Yeah.
And then at that point, that's when I send it to the Baron to actually edit and do layout.
Yes, someday.
Another important thing is always have an editor. I need at least 2 editors because you get so close to the rules that you just don't see. Like you'll read the same misspelt word over and over again and not even notice it. Yeah. So you definitely need extra eyes, and you need extra playtesters, and not just playtesters that you're playing with. You need blind playtesters, people that just pick up the rules and see if they can play them, right? And then come back with lots of questions.
Yeah, I have people that I send stuff to that I know will be brutally honest about things. So
yeah, likewise. I've got some good friends, and I trust them on that. It's hard, right? Sometimes it hurts. It like kicks you in the jimmy, but you got to do it.
Yeah.
And I'll speak about another. I know that you got to show off all the rules that you like doing, but like we're talking about the game design. I think another company that does really good game design that gets the look and feel of what they want to achieve, but the rules are really like what I'd call Hollywood, is Two Fat Lardies. Like I love playing their What a Tanker game, right? It's nothing at all like being in a tank.
Oh no,
but the dice part about it, where you're like scrambling to think you can get that shell in and loading it, or you can't see the thing, or you think you've been in a tank but it's moving around. I've done some World War II reenacting in vehicles, and like I remember trying to turn the turret of our 232 to catch a Greyhound, and you just couldn't. The thing was racing across the open ground so fast. I was so proud of those American tanks. It was so cool. Little driving guys. I bought them drinks afterwards, but like they really do a great job of getting that look and feel of the period, kind of get you immersed in it. And then their mechanics are just kind of built around, like, okay, how do we support that look and feel to make the game work?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great example because I feel exactly the same way. And there were tons of people that I shouldn't say tons. There were people who complained about it, but there were the people that complain about the number of buttons on the, uniform, the Napoleonics you didn't paint, or the right facing.
Oh, boy.
So,
my glasses
ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah.
Now, you brought Napoleonics. That's a big challenge, right? I've actually taken Priestley's Warmaster rules and written a set of Napoleonics for them and tweaked them around to make it work for me. But, I cut my teeth on column line square and in the Grand Manor. right?
Yeah.
Which is Peter Gilder's rules. And honestly, for big massive battles, they're a bit slow for what we're used to today, right? But they're actually a really eloquent set of rules that are well thought out. And once you kind of get things going, they work really well, right? I keep looking for a better set of Napoleonic rules that have that kind of command. I mean, that's why I fall back to Warmaster with my 6mm Napoleonics, because it's about that command and control of things, right? But I think that Peter Gilder did a really, really good job with the look and feel of the different troops historically.
Yeah,
and
I really like Sam Mustafa's rules when it comes to Napoleonics.
Yeah.
We still play a lot of fast play Grand Armée because we can play gigantic battles.
And you guys are doing those in 6mm as well, right?
Yes.
I've not tried Sam's rules yet.
Yeah, LaSalle is very good. I think you'd like it a lot. And then he has Blucher, which is next level up kind of a deal. So you could play at different levels with this stuff, and I think they capture a lot of stuff. The original Grand Army rules were really good, but they, like you said, they had some rules that how often are we going to use this kind of a thing? So, like for instance, if it had rained, your shot didn't do as well, not because they're wet fuses or something. It's because the cannonballs weren't bouncing as far.
Yeah,
sunken into the ground,
stuck in the mud, which is historically accurate.
Yeah, but it was one of those deals like I can't remember. Oh, we're supposed to be playing the rain rules, that kind of stuff, So they took a lot of that out when they did the fast play version, which I think is evolved into the Blucher rules. But I haven't played those, and it's one of those things like you, where we've played this rule set so long, and everyone knows it. That what's the point of changing it if everyone knows it and likes it, kind of a deal. Because we're not button counters or anything like that.
Yeah, I do like a good gun stick. I'm definitely enamored about gun sticks when it comes to rules.
Well,
it's a visual thing, right?
Yeah,
and there's also a certain amount of chaos to it, like a chance. You could like go really good, or it could just bounce straight over, which is basically what the rubber balls do. One of the interesting things about my Wooden Wars game was when you actually start hurling actual projectiles at units, you realize why their tactics at the time were so prevalent, right? Like a line of miniatures, that ball will hit and maybe get 3 or 4 guys. But if they're in column march and they get hit, we would call that the domino maneuver, because you could march faster in column march. But man, if you got hit, it could wipe out literally the whole unit with one ball.
Or or outflanking them and shooting from the side.
Absolutely,
Basically, still a column. So, I like rules that give the feel without being too deep in the weeds, kind of a thing. So, I'm trying to think of some of the ones that I got out last week that we were talking about. Because
on my list, if you go ahead while you're looking for your list, I'll throw out a few for you. Wings. I guess Wings. It was called Wings of War. Now it's Wings of Glory, right?
Yeah.
I love biplanes.
Yep.
It's simple, like, card-based left, right turn, little markers.
I think it's great.
Gorgeous. It has a certain aesthetic to it. And almost always, I forget which way my plane's flying, so I mean to turn right, put down the turn right cards, because the thing's coming at me. Totally fun.
Well, and it's not like the old like Canvas Eagles or Blue Max where with the pre-plotting, not having to be on the hexes and stuff. Really makes it a lot of fun, and not having to worry too much about elevation and all that kind of stuff.
Now I love elevation. I mean, in my Starship game and in Mecha we had elevation too. But they do. It's a nice, eloquent job of dealing with it on the scale of the models that it is. Right. And again, you got to make it simple and easy. Right. I think that for car racing games, I think Roadkill Rally is a beautiful board game that is really a tabletop game. That could be extrapolated out. Really fun. The flipping the track over for the next piece is really cool. That like playing with the weapons, what you get, right? But be able to swap them out. Nice mechanic, so it always changes up the game every time, and makes you feel good. And when you get that weapon that you like a lot, you hold on to it, right? So that also builds up kind of a story thing. And when you're playing with the same people and over again, it also, both of these games build up a story of like, I'm going to go get you this time because you shot me down, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, we had that last. We had that for Steve's birthday party game. We had a little bit of revenge that happened. Why are you shooting me? I'm not even part of the scenario. I remember what you did last time.
Exactly.
This one's for Billy, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, basically.
Never
Totally.
forget.
There's some other rules out there that I think are eloquent, like Death in the Dark Nile, Chris Pierce rules. I'm always looking for that. I love that period, and I keep looking for something that evokes that kind of feeling.
Death on a Dark Continent. Is that the one?
Death on a Dark Continent. Yeah, that's
Yep.
it. Yeah. It's I like it better than the Congo rules, just because I think it just works better storytelling wise for me personally.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of cool, right? Maximilian 1934 is my favorite car racing game right now.
I was waiting for that.
Yeah, Ara Harwood did a great job with it. Very simple rules. They're kind of beer and pretzel-y, but clean, eloquent, and I can teach people to play it, and we can race away, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I love the scale,
Mm-hmm.
and I love the little wooden turn markers and all that stuff.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, those are the ones I just designed to make. The thing I like about that game too is you get to build your own vehicle, so you can tell your own story in these little vignettes that is a vehicle, and you don't have to build a whole army. If you're just racing, you build your car.
Yeah.
Right. Well, of course, I built everybody's cars because it's my game and racing. But
yeah.
But friends build their own cars and come and race them too, which I think is awesome. Right.
Yeah, that's another nice thing about.
They're great looking.
Well, that's the nice thing about especially the Imagination wooden flats that you did.
Mm-hmm.
Because same thing, you can paint your army the way you want to paint it. And,
yeah, absolutely. You have some beautiful flags, and I love what you did with your army. And again, storytelling, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. My world, they're all based. Every one of the armies is based around a barnyard animal. So.
I love that.
Well, and you said, Thomas, well, it's a beer and pretzels game. Sometimes those are, they're the best ones to play sometimes.
Oh, it's
depending on how many people you've got there.
Right. It's the level of detail and the time in the game that you want to play, right? Like I was also thinking about, like we talked about what a tanker, but and then I was kind of going for like what other game systems out there, like what a tanker is very skirmish, one-on-one tank, and then you kind of go to bolt action, which I think is probably I don't know if it's the best rules out there, but I think that they're really good. They're fun to play, and they're good at teaching everybody.
It's all about who you're playing with too. Hello, Cat.
Yeah, sure. It's all who you're playing with, but I think they work really well, and I like the engagement system of how they do the dice.
Well, I like that they. I like the beer and pretzels games because I think they're great introductory for people who might necessarily have never played a war game before, and it might actually get them into it. So it's a great way to start people or introduce people to a game that they may never thought of before, and they're like, "Oh, this is cool. I may dig further into this wargaming thing."
Paul says he's actually heading over to play some bolt action. So sweet. Have fun.
Oh, McMurray, I see what you did there, McMurray.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a few games of bolt action, and it literally was who I was playing with, kind of thing too. So like I played a couple of games of Flames of War. Mm-hmm. With people who were just, it was all about the winning and all that kind of stuff, and I was just like, this game is no fun. And then we kind of took some of the, a lot of the objectives in that was just like, oh, you just got to go over this other guy's little base, basically. It was like capture the flag. And then once we took that out and actually had a real scenario behind it, suddenly it was a much better game.
Sure, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's another part of game design that you need to look at sometimes, and that's the tournament game, right? One of the things that my rules are set up for like equal end tournament rules. As a matter of fact, with flagship games, our motto used to be "Life's not fair, our games aren't either." Right? Yep. It's like that was our motto.
Preach, brother, preach.
Yeah, that actually came about. I ran a game at a Historicon. I brought all my stuff out to Historicon, had a big game, 12 players, and this guy shows up about 20 minutes into the game, and he's like, oh my gosh, I was late. I came all the way from a state that I don't remember, but wasn't there, to come play your game. Can I play? And I'm like, well, I've got all my ships out. Here's a rowboat, here's 4 Marines, and a commander, and a swivel gun. Go. And he rode around, and waited for another ship to get the snot shot out of it. He rode up to it, offloaded the swivel gun, boarded it with his Marines and his first officer, captured the ship, and then sailed it off. And he was the happiest guy in the world. And he had a great time doing it, right? So, having those kind of options are great. But I think like Flames of War is an awesome introductory to historical gaming. Beautiful models. I own so many of them. The books that they publish in terms of painting guides and TOCs and like how to build units and historical things, first rate, phenomenal. The rules are set up so that you can play them in a tournament fashion, which is why you see guys, lining up tanks like a cavalry charge and kind of going through.
Yep.
And people have such a great time playing them because they're really into they're the mindset of players that like playing tournament games. Totally awesome. Not my style of game, but I appreciate all the peripherals, and I have the Flames of War books because I use them to actually build out my army lists because they're so nicely done, right? I think the same thing with rules like Saga. I was really intrigued with Saga because it was bringing out a lot of nice medieval and ancient figures and Vikings and Anglo-Danes and stuff like that. And I love the idea of the kind of holding dice and gambling with your dice to build up powers of doing cool things. Yeah. Really neat idea. But then the first time I sat down and played it at a convention, one of my friends had some beautiful armies playing with, and I tried using actual tactics. Like I tried charging a unit in the flank whilst charging it in the front with my Anglo-Danes, I think they were. Yeah. And he's like, oh, wait, you can't do that. Only one unit can charge a unit at a time. Okay. And I'm like, and we're done. That's what the rules.
And I've got to go do something else.
But so many people play it, and that's awesome. But they know those rules, right? And they're accepting of those rules because it helps balance things out in the way that they're playing the tactics of that particular game system. But to me, it wasn't the real, like, that's not what you do. Flanking is what it's all about, right? Same thing in World War II.
That's literally the best tactic in Warmaster.
It's the best tactic in anything. And that's what the American Army dictum was. Pin them down with all the gunfire and then flank them. Right? How are you going to take out a machine gun, German machine gun nest?
You charge directly into it.
Ooh. Yeah.
I can't do
Steve's mother. We regret to inform you.
I can't do tournament play at all. It does nothing for me.
But a lot of people love it, right? I mean, and even the Magic the Gathering cards, and it's a different mindset. Part of being a game designer, a real eye-opening moment is playing Mordheim, a game I love, as I talked about before. I built a beautiful 4-foot city, spent a couple of years building it up. I had my miniatures, and there was and I had it set up at work at Cryptic Studios at the time because we had a gorgeous game room. They still do. Cryptic's really big about supporting gameplay. We play test things, but one of the programmers wanted to play the game. I'm like, sweet, come play with me. And he brought an unpainted unit of elves. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I can live with that. And he was one of these kind of guys that would take his miniatures and like peek them out from a corner, shoot, and then hide. Peek out, shoot, and hide. And I'm starting to get kind of pissed off about the whole thing. I'm like, bring no unpainted miniatures. He's like min-maxing the rules. And then I sat back for a minute and I'm like, wait a minute. Look at the smile on his face. He's having a blast. Yeah. He loves crunching numbers. He loves min-maxing. He doesn't care about the aesthetics of anything. He's matrixing.
Yeah, he cares less about that city you spent forever building.
He's looking at the 0.1% or the +1 or the +2 he can get up everything and really enjoying the game. And that was a huge eye-opener to me. And once I accepted that, I started playing with him, and it was it was still I just let him do his thing, and he had a blast, and he came back and played later. But that was like, it was really cool learning experience for me on like, and this is true of like, as a rules designer, this, like you build rules thinking that people are going to play them this way.
Yeah.
And this is true of video games too, right? You build, like when I build an MMO, you think, oh, they're going to do this, this, and this. But then when you turn it loose out in the public, the players, it's not your game anymore. It's the player's game. And they are going to do things that you never expected, or they're going to lean on one thing that they really like more and ignore this other thing, right?
Yeah.
Either because they're min-maxers or they're storytellers and they don't even care about the loot. They just care about the costumes, which so it's a really interesting thing. And as I do versions of games, like Pirates went through 3 versions, I was able to take that player feedback and the things that they liked and didn't like, and then keep changing the game to better fit the audience that it was playing.
Thomas, when you do game design and you're play testing, what is your average play testing time to where you get to a point and you say, okay, I feel pretty good about this, it's a wrap?
That all depends on if I have to publish on time. Right? If I've got Galleys, Guns, and Glory was something that I needed to get out and turn around in about 6 months. So I built the basic rules in about a month and a half and started playtesting them and had a good 4 solid months. Let's call that 20 games of playtesting, both on smaller scale and a couple of larger scale ones before I actually launched them. After that, there's still a couple of things in those rules I would probably fix, or I make addendums, or I've got to post up a fact on, like, you know what, let's actually change this number to this instead of that. But that was about it. Now, my Breaking Lances game, I designed that 5 years ago, and I haven't even published it yet. Actually, I plan on doing a Kickstarter with it probably early next year. And that just, the rules are there. I playtested them so much and refined them so much that I've actually added new things like the melee rules. And one of the things I've actually been talking with the Baron about is for single player, because in the times of COVID, that's an important thing. It's also just an important thing that players can play by themselves with a set of rules. You don't get to do that a lot with games. So I've actually started designing a single player system.
Good idea for COVID.
Yeah, and Jay, when did you do solo for, was it right at the beginning of the pandemic for Fistful of Lead?
Basically. And it's just a play test. I've been waiting for people to come back with feedback and stuff, and I really haven't. But so we'll do a wait and see on that one, I guess.
Yeah.
And Steve, if you ever want to play the Galleons, I've got a gigantic box of ships that Thomas sent me. I probably painted about a dozen of them. So
hell yes. Well, and
they're real fun to paint.
A couple of weeks ago, one of the shows a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about. I think it was one of the shows. We were talking about the jousting game, Thomas, that you had.
Breaking Lances.
Yeah, the first Wily War Game weekend. I didn't get a chance to play it because I was running a Star Wars game.
Which looked awesome, by the way.
Thank you. I was commenting on just the reaction. I couldn't see what was going on. I saw the table. The stuff looked great, but the reactions of everybody playing, like scream, like they were winning at the poker table or something. It just loud yelling. It was just having a great time. And I think, for me, that's what you want to see is people having a great time. And I guess that's why I'm always like turned away from tournament play, because it always looks like two people playing chess and somebody's going to lose, somebody's going to win. And it's just, they go on their way and it's a quiet affair, but everybody seemed to be having a blast.
You don't necessarily
we'll be playing
like
it this year.
Oh, go ahead.
I said we'll be playing it this year. So.
Yep, absolutely. I think that. First of all, thank you. That's awesome. And I always try to. Ultimately, games are about interaction with other people and emotional responses, right? You want that. I think that in the tournament games there is that emotional response. It's just a more cerebral thing. What you don't see in a lot of tournament games is people circling around the last two players to watch what happens, right?
Yeah.
And if you do, it's quiet like a golf match. and
Yeah.
mostly
Yeah.
people are flipping through the rules to see if that guy can do it or not do it, right? As opposed to waiting to see if they can outfox the other guy with a card pull.
Yeah,
So,
when it came down to the last 2 nights, everyone was like hushed for the last.
but it was awesome though, right?
Yeah.
Like, they were really, really focusing on like, on what the players were going to do. I think that the big win with Breaking Lances is you're not really playing the rules; you're playing the other player, right? I mean, the rule system is pretty simple, but you're really playing the psychology of the other player, and that's what makes it work right off the bat.
Yeah, Ken got into my head when I was.
You can totally do that.
He
Totally
got into
do
my
that.
head and that I couldn't do anything right. Then it was just boom, right off the horse. I was like, son of a bitch.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I will if I will definitely play that the next chance I get. That's around. I'll just stop the game that I'm running and say, all right, I got to go.
Well, I wanted to play in your Star Wars game because I thought it looked really awesome.
We can swap places.
Let's swap places. I don't know if I'm going to make it up for Wiley War Game Weekend this year due to COVID and everything, but I'm definitely sending out a bunch of nights and things to set up. And Steve, didn't you get a night last time? Didn't I give you one at the convention?
If you probably did. My memory's terrible. If you did, it's probably at Jay's house.
Well, I'll make sure to.
Calm down, mofo.
I'll make sure to pack an extra one when I send Jay the set so he can play.
There's a lot of my stuff that I end up leaving at Jay's house.
So you can paint up your own night. It's more fun to have your own night with your own colors and everything.
Yeah, that was fun looking through the. Oh crap! What's the name of the book?
The Codex Manessa.
There we go. Looking
which is the 13th century
actual
book.
heraldry from the period and stuff, and seeing some of the colors and everything.
Well, and that's actually another great topic of game design, right? Is when I design my games, I also try to design the game pieces to make it feel like you're a part of that time and place in history, right? The galleys very much with all the flags and everything on them in that kind of painterly bright way, make it feel like you're part of that game. Even the game map that I painted is based on a fresco in the Vatican of the Battle of Lepanto, right? In the map that they painted on the wall. I love, and I tried to paint it in that Renaissance style and feel of a fresco painting. When in Breaking Lances, all the models are based on woodcut or paintings from the Codex Manessa, which was basically the heraldry flipbook of a 13th century of all the knights in tournament. So the horses have this kind of dumb, googly-eyed horse look, and you could tell that the heralds, when they were painting this, they had like 2 templates. Do you want horse A or horse B? And they would just draw it down, and then they would draw the basic knight dude, and then the detail parts were the colors, and then the helmet and crest and the shield device. Right, and everything else was just kind of templates. So
they were all pretty much the same. It was very much looks like a coloring book.
Yeah, exactly, and that's totally fine, and that gave me the basis to design my knights and things as well, right? So I tried to keep that scene, keep the line. So when you're looking at it, it looks kind of like a manuscript. That even translates into some of my miniatures lines, like my Killer Rabbits, which is based on medieval marginalia. We really tried to make those look like there was something out of the manuscripts.
To the audience.
Yeah. You get that thing, right? Just like any good Napoleonic sculptor for Napoleonic games would try to make the game have the formations that look good, or
the monk sitting there doodling in the corners, basically.
Oh, yeah, totally. I love that. What a great fun thing, right? These poor monks. Because honestly, if you think about it, in medieval times, the monks were basically the nerds of their time period. They were the gamer geeks and nerds of their period.
Yeah. Speaking of painting, Steve McMurray wants to know what you're painting.
I am painting miniatures for what will end up being a fistful-led campaign game, Terror Island. I am painting all the evil scientists and members and agents of the evil organization known as Cyclops. So I'm trying to finish up a group of bad guys, and then I'm going to start finishing up all of the good guys. but it will be Terror Island, Fistful of Lead.
So
Murray, you
Terror
can
Island-
get in on the Breaking Lances this time around.
What?
No, McMurray said he didn't
What'd
get to play Breaking Lances last time. So
Uh-oh.
yeah, you can get in. And remember, your knight stays with you, so it's like your D&D character, right? All of his accolades come with you. So the next time you bring him to the tournament,
He gets to keep all his stats.
totally gets to keep all his stats.
Can he be killed?
Yeah. You can be damaged a lot. I don't think in the rules I actually have outright killed, but you take a lot of injuries.
You can be so beat up, you're worthless, and you don't want to play.
Basically, what happens is, and anybody that's over 40 totally gets this, right? It's like you build up all your skill points, but then as you start taking injuries, you have to lose skill points to heal up the injuries. So it's like that arm don't move like it used to, right?
The horse gets sent to the glue factory.
Uh-huh.
Well, what Steve was talking about with Terror Island, we're going to have a whole campaign book that's it's going to be a lot about the setting, but it's also going to be rules for using a map type campaign that'll be sort of Chutes and Ladders meets Candyland sort of thing, where you are going to have a definite map and there's going to be stuff along the way, and maybe you get a setback and maybe you can march forward. But as is my way, I'll be using a deck of playing cards to set up the your march basically, and there's going to be a risk reward thing. Do you march? You try to push on, but if you push on, there's more chance bad things can happen. But you could also get further along than maybe the other guys, and everyone will sort of start everywhere in the different parts of the map. There'll be specific places along the routes that'll have like built-in scenarios, but then of course if you cross the path of another player, then you can have an encounter game. So it's my challenge to myself to write a map-based campaign for once.
That sounds really cool.
Yes, Mini Warmut, there is a Dr. Moreau type doctor on the island. I've got all kinds of stuff for the island. But what and we
Aztec Lizardman, Dr. Moreau, Undead Nazis,
giant gorillas. The thing is like Jay's always tried to do with our gaming group campaign games, and there's usually we've got 6 to 8, sometimes now 10 people that are showing up, and it's a revolving door, and you don't know who's going to show up, and it's hard to plan doing a campaign game if the same guys aren't going to be there all the time. So what we're going to do is we set up this to where if you're there that week, you play your team, and then other people will play adversaries. So we can balance it out. So when the guys that aren't there come, they'll play their team. Nobody has to be there at the same time. Other people can play at like kind of NPC adversaries or island denzians.
Yeah. Which, speaking of campaign and game design sort of a thing, I've always been an advocate of just, not mapless, and you play when you can play. And of course the players that play more are going to advance more, and the players who can't play as much and to me that sort of makes sense. So, your guys that are out there looking for treasure more are going to get more treasure, and the ones that aren't. So you have to be willing to play with the deficit kind of a deal, but maybe your team, you're not playing so much, you're not as chewed up. And then we've done our medieval campaign for years and years and years, and that's always fun because it's really only the 2 players who have the most points that really have to be there, and everybody else is sort of ancillary. But those people, depending on how they play, can end up being one of those 2 players, and maybe they shift up and now they're the pretender to the throne because they've once they've been acted. So, and it's turned out to be a lot of fun because again you get rivalries built up, and someone might have been on your side the last turn or last game, and they either didn't play as well as you wanted them to or something, so you end up not inviting them to be on your team the next game, and then you get a little rivalry built up, and we get some beheadings. It's always fun because the way we set it up is basically like a a kickball team every week. So
I think you could absolutely close with that quote. And we have some beheadings. It's always fun. Dot, dot,
yeah,
dot.
yeah,
Beheadings are always fun, and that's the thing is if your team sucks, it's you pick the team, dude. It's not the rules; it's your pickings.
Garm wants to know when we'll be seeing another Red Raptor or Pecos Pete battle report. Oh, yeah, we'll get around. They'll be in the Terror Island games for sure. That's going to be definitely more pulp. So,
And the thing is like,
our next.
when was the last time we played Pecos Pete?
It's been a while. We just haven't been in a pulp mood, but we're going to do. Not normally we'd be playing this Thursday, but we are Thomas. We're playing our possible final battle in our D&D campaign that we've been playing over COVID this entire time.
Oh, superb!
It's like our 50th session, and
Yeah, it's damn close to that.
it's going to be the giant battle at the end, and half of us aren't going to survive. I'm going to survive because my guy's got flight spell and some invisibility, so shit starts going south, I'm out of there. But
Pretty sure Tiamat can see invisibility.
Yep. And then the following week we're doing a big Nazi base in somewhere in South America, 1954. The occult wars are just coming to an end. They're trying to bring something from the outer dark through to help them for their Project Ragnarok, and of course they brought the Liberty Legion out of retirement. So major victory, and all our favorites going to be taking them on. We'll have superheroes. We'll have zombies. We'll have alien creatures.
Unspeakable
horrors. So
and portals. Oh my!
Yeah. So we got Tristan asks, how long do your campaigns usually last? Do you set up a win condition or play X amount of games, most renowned wins, something else? So in most of our books, you'll see that that's all explained in the campaign section. It'll usually, especially with the Cowboys and Wasteland Warriors, we go into depth about that. A lot of times we'll set up a specific renown point to get to, and then whoever reaches that gets to have a final showdown with the next player points wise, winner take all. Whoever wins that is the winner of the campaign. But you could set it for X amount of games. You could set it for points. It's however you want to do it. So, but that's my sort of campaign philosophy. Just have
champagne.
Well, have attainable goals basically, and it also depends on how many players you've got. So, Thomas, you have any campaign advice in game design?
Yeah. Make sure that you have a club that actually shows all the time. I actually, even for Wooden Wars, I rolled a simple set of campaign rules, and it worked. It worked very similar to kind of what you're saying with like who shows up at the time, or setting up the rules of things on how to stage and play the next game, right? So like, did you catch them on the road? Well, then it's an open field battle. Did you catch them at their fort? Well, then they're defending. You're attacking, right? Is it your fort that they're attacking at? And then it's like, it's almost like Condottieri, one of my favorite board games, right?
Yes.
Who captured?
God, I haven't played that forever.
Who captured, the three forts out of everybody else, right? So then it's kind of a race game kind of thing. So you can close it off something like that. And with map movement, making it simple. I actually really liked. The Perrys had some English Civil War rules called 1644.
Yep.
And on the back of it, there's a campaign map of like movement and things.
Yep.
Yeah. It's the chutes and ladders thing that you were talking about.
It was chutes and ladders.
Yeah. And that's basically what I did for Wooden Wars. It worked really well. And I just changed the pathing on how or what the tactics were depending on when you met at each type of section of terrain when you're moving things around. I've actually been working on a set of rules for sieges. I think sieges are really cool, but when you sit down at a convention game to play them, not so cool.
Boring.
Right. So I'm working on, again, similar to your chutes and ladders kind of analogy, something like that works where you find these hot spots, like how it's almost like red light, green light, right? How far you can get before you get caught, and then that's when the fight happens, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then that's when you stage the battle, right? So interesting ways of scenarioing it. You know, are they just shelling you from the very beginning because you're exposed? Did you manage to actually get up to this, to, you know, get your ladders up to the walls, or did you manage to make a breach in the wall, right? So I think that's really fun, and it's that kind of pressure luck kind of thing that I like,
Yeah.
which is another thing I actually like about Warmaster, right? With the rules is like you can press your luck to try and get command rules to really get your guys to charge in, or they could be sucking wind in the middle of the battlefield.
Yeah, there's I don't know if you've ever been to the Perfect Captains website. They just put out free rules. Other than they ask you to contribute to these, they've got a whole. It's really nice to have a list of humanitarian causes you can give to when you do it.
Neat.
And they have a siege set of rules that's actually pretty good. It's a Renaissance era, and you get a big board, and it's pretty cool. It's all about supply, and can you get through, supplies through, and then when to attack the wall when, and you as the besieged have to, sort of marshal your forces, and where are you going to commit to the most.
I'll take a look at them. Thanks.
Yeah, and then if you're doing it as a campaign game, then of course when you had actual battle parts, you could fight them out on the tabletop. So like if you are going to have a little leave the confines and run out and attack, to mess with the besiegers or something like that, or you might get lucky and some help comes, try to break through and that kind of thing. So I think that sounds awesome. I do love that. Is the sieges always look really cool in the movies, but when you try to play them in a game, unless it's just that final assault part, they're not a whole lot. I've run a couple. They've been good. They've been mixed. So I think mine was using the old Tactica rules.
Oh wow! Mm-hmm.
The old Tactica siege rules, which was just an insane amount of miniatures to have to paint.
Well, I mean, going back to Warhammer Siege, right? Also fun set of rules, and Warmaster Siege. You can do sieges in Warmaster as well.
Yeah.
Mighty Empires also had some rules that you could play out or do. Actually, one of the campaigns that we've done successfully in my group is actually playing Mighty Empires.
Yeah.
And we ended up doing it on like Rule D20 over COVID, and that worked out pretty well.
We did it as a play by kind of email thing where I had the master map and I had already built the map and I had it covered up, using Photoshop. And then as they went into a hex, I would reveal it, So it was already built. I had already created the world. And so there wasn't the mechanic of seeing what's going to be laid down next. But so that part of it, but we used all the other mechanics of it, and that was a lot of fun. And then, obviously fight the battles when you get there, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember if we used Warhammer for the actual battles or not. So, but I haven't played Warhammer in decades. Not because it wasn't fun, but it was always one of those things where I always had more fun with who I was playing with, and then there's the, speaking of game mechanics, the whole rank and file versus I've now gravitated more towards, I like the bases of miniatures rather than removing individual figures, because that was the only thing that was bothering me was I spent all this time painting, and then as I'm taking casualties, I'm pulling these individual figures off of the bases. And even especially I really hated it was when you had movement trays, then you had these big blank spaces left after you're pulling the miniatures out.
There was a certain lack of aesthetics there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I always liked I've gravitated more towards big bases of lots of figures that are, little vignettes in of their own. And then I've seen a lot of people like do Kings of War that way too. Mm-hmm. And then you just either keep a rouster sheet or you keep a little die behind it that's maybe a little innocuous. You don't really see it, kind of a deal. And keep track of casualties and stuff that way. So
yeah, I love Kings of War. It's a kind of almost the next generation. It's like Warhammer meets Warmaster in kind of how games rules together, and I think it's nicely done. I've been looking at Oathmark lately. Is the kind of the new Warmaster of things, of Warhammer rather of things. But it also kind of reminds me of the old Knights and Magic rules, which I actually really liked a lot. But they're not.
I didn't like them as well, just because I didn't like the very fixed sizes of units and stuff, and I got really into
in which one?
In Oathmark.
Oh, in Oathmark, yeah. There's a weird like, you know, I can only go 10 deep or four wide and 2 big.
It's like 5, I think. Is
like 5. Like, well, how do I do a pike block? Yeah, no, I get that, but I think that, but I'm still looking at. I appreciate the designer's goal to try and build a D10 system.
Yes,
but with that many figures, without having to throw tons of D10s. I've tried it. I've failed on these rule systems, so I appreciate that, right? But looking at that, but back to the vignette thing, I love the aesthetic of it, but it bugs the hell out of me that I can't remove figures. I like removing figures. I like when the cannonball bounces through that there's a hole in it, right? I guess
if I went back and I painted up an old Hammer army, I would do that. But I've had so much fun and love the way it looks when we do our medieval game, and I've just got these big blocks of miniatures, and I can build the weight. So the other thing I hate about most of those single figure stuff is they always look too far out. They always look too far space. So
or
you'll see like a Napoleonic or a Civil War game, and I'm like, there's like a dude's width between each figure, and I'm like, no.
Yeah.
If you've ever been a reenactor, or you've actually seen medieval paintings or something like that, they're crunched in there. So when I'm painting like a block of guys, I only give them like a 15 millimeter frontage most. So I'll have a 60 by 60 base, and they'll be 4 across and 2 deep. And it actually looks more realistic. You got some guys kind of over the top, and you've got some down below. That's why I like those Claymore figures. Are perfect for that.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that David Emery is the god of making dioramas, vignettes off of his basing. Really good. And as a matter of fact, that was one of the pillars of the rules when we were writing them. Was that they would be, the units would be on multi bases, right? And then those units would be 3 bases. Well, actually, you could go up to 5 if you wanted to, like Chiltrons or stuff like that. But it'd be 3 bases per stand. And it's the same thing. Like, you don't lose a base until you've lost a certain amount of figures, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then they carry on. So with that, and I think that looks fine. I definitely, with my Triumph of Death stuff, I'll be doing. I already done multi-base. I've got big pike blocks, and I love that vignette of things. I guess it just depends on what game I'm playing, right? But I love Knights of Magic in the skirmish rules, because then it's like I have one fully armored knight. He's the Baron. He's got his son that has armor and maybe a barded horse, but he's like class B. Then we've got like 3 guys that have unarmored horses and spears. And then I've got, a handful of crossbow or bow, and I've got a handful of spear guys, right? But that's more like Lion Rampant, or that kind of skirmish.
Or my rules.
Or your rules, exactly.
So that's exactly what we went for on the first book. That's the combat part, is literally that's going to be the size of, your retinue will be.
Yeah, and I love that, right? It's just it feels retinue-y, right? It feels like it feels organic. That's what this knight would have.
Well, and you'll be fighting fighting a campaign that's maybe, you never leave your county. You're just fighting off some bandits, or you're fighting, going to tax collecting or some sort. There's a rogue dragon in the, in the kingdom, kind of a thing, or whatever it is, that kind of thing. Tristan asked us, do you have a specific genre that you like, or that you dislike or struggle with the most to get the rules just right? I usually just avoid that genre because I don't like it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, actually, I love the way that samurai armies look.
Yep. But if you're going to be historical, it's impossible to.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel fun when you actually play them in an historical manner. All the
weird formations, all the How do you capture they don't fight how Western armies fight? So how do you capture
It's
You know,
really a challenge. It's really a challenge.
I mean, I know you were involved in the Tycho rules.
I
weren't
was
you?
involved in the Tycho rules, although that was 90% Rod Thompson actually writing them. I was more the playtester feedbacker guy to try and get the feeling, and Rod did a really good job with that. But even then, it never it didn't get the fun factor that I wanted of French knights charging in and smashing kind of thing. So to me that was a big challenge.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, and which is a pity because I think they're absolutely gorgeous. I painted up a huge, I think it was 2 dragons, 15mm armies.
Yeah,
And I love
bought
the
a
models.
ton of those.
I love the models. I loved it. I love the period, but I could never make it feel right.
Yeah.
It felt more like a chess game than a game, which is historically accurate, but not fun to me. Let's see other genres that I dislike or struggle with the most. Sometimes it's not about the genre; it's about the system of the rules that you're trying to build. Disclaimer: I don't want to diss any other gamers because things are challenging. But like we just talked about Oathmark and trying to do something off a D10. Like I really want to get away from a D6. How do I build a D10 system? It's a super hard thing to do. I've managed to do it with a couple of my games, but when I tried actually doing it with when we were building the game for Claymore Castings to use D10s so you can get a better spread. But when you have bigger armies, it's really a challenge to do. It's okay to do if you're doing skirmish, but with anything bigger armies, it's really a challenge to do.
The
but sometimes
Flower Silver uses a D10, and I love it.
Yeah.
And it's throwing one die. It's not throwing handfuls of dice either.
Right. I like throwing handfuls of dice. I love that. A lot of the Osprey rules feel to me like they are trying to write rules to sell miniatures or write rules to sell pictures or books, and they don't feel all the way thought through. I have them all, and I'm always inspired by what they're trying to do, but I think that some of those things are challenging, and I'll talk about those constraints on like what the designers have. Like you have so many pages to write rules, you have to fill this many pages to write rules, right? Yeah. Which is a challenge too, and it always has to be using D6s. So right, make this one feel different than the other one.
One of the great turning points of my life was when Osprey turned down the original Fistful of Lead rules because there wasn't enough there, and but then I go and read some of their stuff, and I'm like, "You're kidding me, right?" Yeah. But it was great because then I got to have my game, and I got to create it the way I want, and I could do expansions, and I can do all that stuff. I've seen some other authors that I don't want to say are trapped by working for them, but they've been limited on what they could do,
right.
Afterwards. They either had to go somewhere else or kind of leave their little baby behind or, publish stuff on their own that they wanted to do. So that was actually a good moment for me when they to get rejected, because then I could just do my own thing. So I got this empire that I have now, as you can see in my
and history was made.
Glorious purpose. Tristan, this is such a good question. I think another genre that I keep struggling to get right is science fiction boots on ground kind of thing. I've got a set of rules I call combat that I've been working on off and on for a decade. I think that games like Dirt Side were beautifully done. But chits. If you lost one chit out of there, the entire game was screwed, right? And you couldn't do things that I wanted to do. Like I really wanted to build bolos. I wanted to build ogres, right? I wanted to do like an ogre game in that thing. But I also wanted the players to have that agency to design their models and ships and things like that. And I've been working on that, but it's a real challenge. And I'm trying to think of other.
Dirt Side was great, except you usually had more chits on the table than you did miniatures at some point.
Yeah, but they had the right look.
They had the right idea. You could see what they were trying to do.
You got the element of it. I mean the others, there were a lot of other games out there at that time that were just really even more super basic, so I love what they did there, and I appreciate their challenge. And that's
all level. They tried to do all level of it. The space battle. Dirt Side, and then what's the skirmish?
Star Grunt.
Star Grunt. There you go.
Grunt. Yeah. So I totally appreciate that, but I'm still working on that set of rules. Not only am I not working on that set of rules to make it challenging, I'm still struggling on should it be 6mm or should it be 15mm?
And can you build it both ways?
You can build it both ways, but I have to collect. So like I've already got a really good collection of 6mm from Dirt Side and other stuff I built, but I'm getting old and I don't want to paint any more 6mm. Also the cost of it, right? Like there's some great 6mm stuff out there, but the cost of it is the same as buying 15mm, and the 15mm tanks are also like crazy, like $20
That's
for a
why
15mm
I'm printing them,
model.
baby.
I
That's
know.
why I'm printing them.
Jay's shrinking them down.
Or just taking. There's so many 15mm ones out there too.
Yeah,
It's. I know it's been a boon for the World War II people because you can't copyright a Tiger, so
right.
You could find all that stuff out there. Not Jay, aka Chris, wants you. Arnold
I'll be
wants
right
you to do 6.
I'm gonna pick up my meds, and the kids want burgers. You want a burger?
Yeah, sounds great.
Just your usual cheddar burger with everything on it, grilled onions.
No cheddar.
Cheddar with everything.
Burger, no sauce.
No sauce. Yeah, grilled onions, mustard. Thank you.
Go cheddar and
No cheddar
and
onions.
Fancy sauce on it.
We have
Fancy sauce.
No fancy sauce, just mustard. We have a great greasy spoon here called the Happy Hound. And they've been here for like 20 years, and they just make the best burgers. It's our best local burger joint that we like supporting.
Good.
Sounds cool. Sounds wonderful.
Since I'm talking to you guys, I'm not making dinner tonight, so
yeah. Well, we're reaching our hour and a half point, so we'll probably wrap up. So if anybody's got a real
I would ask what do you got next? What's on your table next, Thomas? What's next for you
in terms of game design?
Yes.
Well, I'm actually working on a set of, so for my last Kickstarter, Space Scrappers, part of the stretch goal unlocks was I did a campaign map that was based on like Thorin's map of Middle Earth, but it was in space. And each of the unlocks for the Kickstarter stretch goal was a chapter in The Hobbit-ish. So like the first one was, when they met the trolls, right? So this one is called Trollbot Bridge. So the idea is that the Space Scrappers with Biljo buckets, they have found a space Hulk that is a security ship full of munitions, but somebody's already tripped the wire. So the security trollbots are patrolling around. So you have to get to the bridge to shut down the main security switch so the trollbots don't keep spawning. But in the meantime, they're trolling around. So and that's one of the scenarios. So I'm actually cleaning up those scenarios unlocked so that I can actually give them to Jay so he can do the layout for them. And because we'll also be using them not only. So my rules are basically I'm just setting up basically so you can play them with Oldhammer, but Jay's also setting them up so we can use them for Galactic Heroes, which is really super cool.
Awesome.
So that's the biggest thing on my list, and then finishing up the edits for Breaking Lances so we can actually get that into publication. Other than
are you
that,
still working on the Claymore rules too?
Well, I am working on the Claymore rules, but really we're in just full playtesting at this point and just and editing and kind of going through. It's the winnowing down. And then with the Breaking Lances, something that I've been working on as a side is looking at a more fantasy version of it. So imagine, if you will, that you are the knight, but you're riding instead on a flail snail or a wyvern or a dragon or a giant armored rhinoceros. And like this kind of fantastic kind of drawings and ideas.
Awesome.
And your armor would be
medieval myths. So you could have They never mentioned orcs, but there are hobgoblins and fairies.
Sure.
And
the armor is very indicative of like you're riding on an undead horse and you've got like undead skeleton armor, something really fantastic. And the idea is that the mounts or your skills add extra things to the joust. Like imagine if you're on a dragon or something's got a breath attack, it would get an attack on you, get to roll dice even before you actually made contact. Right, where like maybe a flail snail, once you made contact, you would get extra attacks, right? So it's, or the armored rhino is just like really good at charging and just barreling through, but also gives you extra armor because it's just hefty.
Yeah.
So
it's Mario Kart.
Total Mario. I love Mario Kart. Why not Mario Kart?
It's great. Why not?
Yeah. So I've been playing around with those rules too for like almost. I mean, that would be awesome in kind of a cool mini or not kind of box set kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it would. Yeah,
But that's a little bit
absolutely would.
farther down the line. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my problem is I've got too many ideas and I have to figure them out one at a time. But luckily I have other people in the company that tell me what I'm supposed to be working on. So
Jay texted me when he finished Bannis, and he's like, Robin told me that I'm supposed to take a break for X amount of period of time. And then it's like literally an hour later, I get a text. He's like, all right, I'm secretly working on this already. I got ideas. I'm not telling Robin.
Dude, we've all been there. We're still there.
And it's like,
We're
you
totally
can't help
there.
yourself. You can't help yourself.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I would, now that 3D printing is out, I would love to actually do a redo of Starship. My Starship rules were actually pretty popular.
Those were a big hit too.
They were a big hit, and not just my rules. I mean, that was the whole flagship team that actually wrote those rules together.
Yeah.
So a lot of help from Rod Thompson and Brad Carlson, especially on numbers crunching. But now with 3D printing out, to be able to actually 3D print the ship designs, because the idea for the ship designs is that they were basically whole shapes and sizes that were different classes, and then you built it on. You know, is this class 3 ship? Is it a carrier? Is it a missile ship? Is it a gun ship?
Yeah.
Right. So and then you're bolting all the things onto the hull that make it read as that kind of thing. Right. It's also a 3-dimensional game, and I think, and I've been working with a couple of 3D printer guys, or maybe even Siocast, on being able to build. So you know how like in the airplane game we were talking about, how they have the little pieces that
little
just click
sticks
together.
that load into each other.
Right. Well, I want ones that are this big. Right.
Yeah.
I only need 3. But I like that dimensionality of the game. But I need them this big. So if we can figure out,
those are easier to manipulate without losing the miniature than some of the having a flip that you have to slide up and down.
Yeah. Well, currently what I use is I actually use antennas, aerials, and when we originally sold the game, I sourced those out and bought like 1,000 of them, of which I've got maybe like 20 left, right? Well, because that's kind of how you do it. Like when you buy those deals in bulk in Japan, like not Japan, China, it's like oh yeah, we'll sell these to you for X dollar, pennies on the dollar each, but the minimum order is 10,000 or 1,000 at the time.
Yeah.
We found a company that would sell by 1,000. So we're doing that. So it could be, if I do this as a Kickstarter, it could be one of those things that's backed, and then we could do those. But I'd love to be able to figure out a way to 3D so that you could 3D print pegs that go on top of each other. And I have a couple of designs that I've actually sent off to a 3D artist to actually start helping me prototype those. Because, like you said, we keep on designing. We rest. We never sleep.
Yes, never rest. Well, Thomas, stay on with us here after I end the broadcast. We're going to play your teaser one more time just so people could see what you do. And thanks to everybody who's watching. Thanks to everybody who commented. We're at 239 subscribers. We're going to try to get to 250 by October. So tell your friends, tell your family to subscribe to us.